Why does the Philippines still claim Sabah? This is not a dispute over just another island. This is a dispute of enormous magnitude, a territory whose resources make up a significant portion of Malaysia's wealth. If Sabah were ever recovered by the Philippines, the economic impact could dramatically reshape the balance of wealth in Southeast Asia. Sabah is a land rich in natural resources, almost the size of South Korea. It holds vast reserves of natural gas, fertile soil, and deposits of numerous valuable minerals. Yet through a complex chain of colonial dealings and British intervention, control over this territory slipped away from the Philippines. Today, Sabah is part of Malaysia. But for the Philippines, that should never have been the case in the first place. Because according to the Philippine interpretation of the 1878 agreement, the territory of Sabah was never sold. Instead, it was leased by the Sultan of Sulu to two European businessmen connected to British interests. Those men were Baron Gustav von Overbeck, an Austrian, and Alfred Dent, a British national. Under their agreement with Sultan Jamalul Alam of Sulu, the Europeans obtained administrative rights over North Borneo in exchange for annual payments to the Sultan in the amount of 5,000 Mexican dollars per year. Supporters of the Philippine claim point to this arrangement as evidence that the agreement functioned more like a lease than a permanent transfer of sovereignty. And if the agreement was indeed a lease, then when the British later ended their administration of the territory, the land should have been returned to its original sovereign, the Sultanate of Sulu. Instead, the British transferred control of North Borneo to a newly created federation that would soon become Malaysia. For the Philippines, that transfer was never legally justified, and that is where the dispute begins. Hello everyone, welcome back to Fun Fact. If you enjoy fascinating history and powerful stories, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. The agreement that started the dispute. To understand the dispute over Sabah, we must look at a single document, a treaty signed more than 140 years ago, what historians now call the 1878 Agreement. This lease agreement was signed on January 22, 1878, between three parties. On one side was Sultan Jamalul Alam, the ruler of the Sultanate of Sulu, governing from his capital in Jolo. On the other side were two European businessmen, Baron Gustav von Overbeck and Alfred Dent. The agreement granted these Europeans control over a vast territory in northern Borneo, the region we now know today as Sabah. But from the very beginning, the meaning of this agreement has been fiercely debated. Because the entire dispute hinges on one crucial question: what exactly did the treaty transfer? According to the Malaysian interpretation, the agreement represented a permanent cession. In other words, the Sultan of Sulu sold the territory forever. But the Philippine interpretation tells a very different story. According to the Philippine position, the agreement did not permanently transfer sovereignty. Instead, it granted administrative rights under what amounted to a lease arrangement. And the debate centers around a single word found in the treaty, the word pajak. In many Malay contexts, pajak can mean several things, including lease, mortgage, rent, or pledge. That ambiguity lies at the very heart of the Sabah dispute, because depending on how that word is interpreted, the entire meaning of the treaty changes. The annual payment. The structure of the agreement raises another important question. Under the terms of the 1878 treaty, the Europeans agreed to pay the Sultan of Sulu 5,000 Mexican dollars every year. At the time, the Mexican silver dollar was widely used across international trade in Asia. Later, when the British North Borneo Company acquired additional territory from the Sultan of Brunei, the annual payment to Sultan Jamalul Alam increased slightly to $5,300 per year. But what makes this detail significant is not just the amount, it is the nature of the payment. Because instead of paying a single purchase price, as would normally happen in a sale, the Europeans agreed to make payments every year. Supporters of the Philippine claim often point to this as a crucial detail. If the territory had truly been sold permanently, why would annual payments continue for more than a century? Those payments began to look very much like rent, rather than the price of a permanent sale. And rent suggests a lease, not a permanent transfer of sovereignty. payments that continued for more than a century. The payments did not stop when the original businessmen stepped aside. They continued when the territory came under the administration of the British North Borneo Company. They continued even after Britain itself took direct control of the territory in 1946, when North Borneo became a British Crown colony. And remarkably, the payments continued even after Sabah became part of Malaysia in 1963. For more than a century, the heirs of the Sultan of Sulu continued receiving these payments. Malaysia continued making these annual payments until 2013, when they were suspended after the Lahad Datu crisis intensified tensions surrounding the claim. For supporters of the Philippine claim, this long history of payments raises an obvious question. If the land had truly been sold in 1878, why were the payments still being made generation after generation? How the Philippine claim emerged. But if Sabah was originally tied to the Sultanate of Sulu, why is it now the Philippines making the claim? The answer lies in what happened in the 20th century. By the early 1960s, the Sultanate of Sulu was no longer a sovereign power in the old sense. The world had changed. Empires had fallen. Modern nation-states had risen. And the Republic of the Philippines had already become an independent state. In 1962, the heirs of the Sultan of Sulu formally transferred their sovereign rights and claims over North Borneo to the Philippine government. From that point onward, the issue was no longer simply a dispute involving an old royal house. It became a matter of state policy. The president of the Philippines at that time was Diosdado Macapagal, and under his administration, the Philippines formally asserted its claim to Sabah. Macapagal's position was straightforward. If the Sultanate of Sulu had never permanently surrendered sovereignty over North Borneo, and if those rights had been transferred to the Republic of the Philippines, then the Philippines had the legal basis to pursue the claim. In other words, the Philippine claim to Sabah did not appear out of nowhere. It was based on the argument that the rights once held by the Sultanate of Sulu had passed to the Philippine state. And that is why, from 1962 onward, it was no longer just the heirs of the Sultan who were claiming Sabah. It was the Republic of the Philippines itself. The territory was never returned. Another point frequently raised by supporters of the Philippine claim concerns what happened later. If the original agreement was indeed a lease, then when the British administration ended, the territory should have been returned to the original sovereign, the Sultanate of Sulu, whose rights had by then been transferred to the Republic of the Philippines. But that is not what happened. Instead, Britain incorporated North Borneo into a new federation that would soon become Malaysia in 1963. From the Philippine perspective, this was a crucial turning point. Because the territory had been transferred to a new state, even though the underlying sovereignty dispute had never been fully resolved. The dispute that remains. More than a century has passed since the agreement signed in Hulu in 1878. And yet, the question of Sabah remains unresolved. For the Philippines, the argument is rooted in history. A treaty whose meaning remains disputed. A territory that was once under the authority of the Sultanate of Sulu. Annual payments that continued for generations. And rights that were later transferred to the Republic of the Philippines. From this perspective, Sabah was never permanently surrendered. But the story does not end there, because Malaysia strongly rejects this interpretation. According to the Malaysian position, the 1878 agreement was never a lease at all. They argue that the Sultan of Sulu ceded the territory permanently, making Sabah a legitimate part of Malaysia today. Two nations, two interpretations of the same historical document, and a dispute that continues to shape politics in Southeast Asia. So who is right? Was Sabah leased, or was it truly sold forever? In our next video, we will examine Malaysia's side of the story and the arguments they use to defend their claim. Because to understand this dispute fully, we must hear both sides of history.